Okay, good morning, everyone. This week's learning is dedicated by the Portnoy to remember the art site of her mother, Tzivia Bas Henach, that is today. That's this week's learning, again, is sponsored in memory of Tzivia Bas Henach. Okay, so we're up to Parak Tes Mishna Zayin. Now, in the previous Mishnah, we said that the Revi'ah Shniya, which means the second rainfall, there were three expected rainfalls between the autumn and from the autumn through the winter in Eretz Yisrael, and the second rainfall, which took place typically on the 27th of the Hebrew month of Cheshvan. The previous Mishnah determined for certain things when the time for beer would take place, and now this Mishnah Zayin is going to give us other examples of where the Revi'ah Shniya becomes the criterion to decide something. So Kayetzabay, similarly, Hamasker Bayis Lachaverai, one who rents his house to someone else, and the stipulation that's made is that, or rather the time for how long this rental goes for is made up ad hakshamin. You're renting the house until the rains. That's the wording, until the rains. So that's how it was stipulated. What does that mean? Which rains? The answer is Achaterid Revi'ah Shniya. We say that means until the second rains fall. And the reason is because the word Geshamim is plural for rains. It doesn't say Geshem, it says Geshamim, which is plural. And without stipulating a number in front of it, the minimum plural is 2. And therefore, when the stipulation is until I'm renting you this house until the rains, it means until the second rains. Once this period comes, you can evict the person because the terms of the rental are over. Until then, you can't evict him because you made it with him to rent him for that period of time. Another example of where the second rains determine something is Hamudar Hana Mechaverai, one who forbids himself to have benefit from someone else. There is a law in the Torah called Neder, which means I have the power to forbid upon myself something that would typically be permissible. He can even go as far to say that I forbid myself to have any kind of benefit from another person. Now, let's say and how long does that Neder last for? It depends on what you stipulate when you make the vow. So, let's say the person forbade himself from having benefit from another person. Arak shamin. He stipulated, how long is this vow going for? Until the rains. And there it says the Mishnah, Achateirei Revi'ah Shniya. That goes as until the second rains come down. Once the second rains come down, after that point of time, you may have benefit from this person. Until then, you may not. Now, the Rambam brings down that there is discussion around both these examples, that when you stipulate the rentals until the second rains, or that the vow not to benefit from someone or something goes until the rains, does it mean until the actual rains fall or until the period when those rains are expected? That's a question. Does it mean the period when they would be coming, when they're expected to become, or does it mean once they actually fall? Okay. Now, here's going to be another example of how we determine something by the second rains. And that is, translated, it means, until when can the poor enter the orchards? What are they entering the orchards for? So there's two explanations. One explanation is that we're talking about, this is not even a Shemitah discussion. This is a year-round discussion. The poor have a right to enter the fields to collect the things that the Torah says you have to leave for them. You have to leave leket. If the stalks fall, the gleanings, you have to leave it for them. Shikha, if you forget grain, you have to leave it for them. Peah, you have to intentionally leave a part of the field, a corner of the field for them to be able to come and cut down and take for themselves. So we say that, and you can't stop them, you have to let them come and take. But the Mishnah tells us there is a time limit. There's a point where it has to stop. At what point, until when can the poor enter the orchards, which means there's a point of time that we can stop them, until the second rains fall. Once we come to the point of the second rains, then already the poor may not even come to collect what they rightfully have a right to collect. And the reason is because once you hit the period of the second rain, so then at that point of time, the farmer has already planted new seeds for the crop. These things that the poor collect from are things the poor collect from during the harvest. And now you're already into a period of where there's planting going on. Now, there's still both. There's still planting going on. There's still harvest going on. There's still things for the poor to come and to collect from. But there's a certain point of time where you have to let them come in because they have a right to collect their things and they don't cause any damage to what you're growing. But once we are concerned that by them coming and walking into your field, they're going to step on things and ruin it, at that point you don't have to let them in anymore. So before the second rains, even that which you've planted isn't affected by them coming and walking into your field. But once the second rains come, at that point of time, things are already growing to a point that if they do start coming in, then they could step on and ruin it. Therefore, we say that until the second rains fall, the poor can come in. After the second rains fall, they can't come in. That's one way of looking at it. Others say that what it really means is that even though the Mishnah says the words aniyim, the poor, but according to another explanation, we're talking about Shemitah produce. We're taking a Shemitah produce that has already extended into the 8th year, into the year following Shemitah. Now, Shemitah produce, we know, you can't stop people from coming to take it. It has to be hefker. You have to treat it like it's ownerless. You got to let other people have it, let other people come in to take it. And that extends, and as long as you have Shemitah produce growing, you still have Shemitah produce, even if it's already into the 8th year. If it grew in the 7th year, it's Shemitah produce. You got to let other people take it. Here, too, we say you only have to let them into your fields to take that Shemitah produce that extended into the 8th year, only until the second rain. After the second rain, you don't have to let them in, because by coming in, they're going to ruin that which you planted. During Shemitah, you're not planting anything, so they can come in. And until the second rain, if they come in, again, they're not going to hurt, they're not going to damage anything. But once already it comes to the second rain, and people coming in now to collect the Shemitah produce, they're going to ruin that which you grew, then the Torah doesn't obligate you to have to let those people come to take, even though it's Shemitah produce that you're stopping them from. Once it's a question of damage to the field, you don't have to let them in anymore. So this is another example of where we determine things by the second rains. Then we have a third example. And again, this example relates to Shemitah. From when can we benefit and burn stubble and straw of Shemitah? Okay, stubble and straw of Shemitah, the stubble and straw that grew during the Shemitah, is animal food. If it's animal food, then the halacha is that it has the sanctity of Shemitah. If it has sanctity of Shemitah, then you may only use it for specific things, as we learned before. You could feed it to the animals, but if you decide that you want to now use it for fuel, you want to burn it in your stove, to heat up your stove, to be able to cook something or to bake something, you're not allowed to do. The only thing you can use Shemitah produce for are for things that you use similar to eating, which the Mishnah is before explained means that when you benefit, at the same time, simultaneous with your benefiting, that's when you're consuming the Shemitah produce. When you eat, you benefit as you eat, and as you're benefiting, you're consuming it, you're eliminating it. But when you're using something for fuel, the benefit comes from what you cook afterwards, and you've consumed the fuel, what you use for the fuel itself. You've consumed it before. You've consumed it. It's created the heat. The heat is stored in the oven, and then you use it for cooking or for baking. So therefore, to use this straw or stubble of Shemitah as a fuel, to burn it up and use it as a fuel, that you're not allowed to do because it's Shemitah produce. But the Mishnah tells us that only goes up to a certain point of time. There will be a point of time that this straw and stubble of Shemitah, that you will be able to use it for fuel, which means it will lose its sanctity of Shemitah. When is that? Once the second rain falls. Once the second rain falls, the stubble and the straw that you already have in your house, that you were treating with the sanctity of Shemitah, once the second rain falls, that sanctity goes away. It goes off of that stubble and straw, and you can go ahead and use it for fuel. You don't got to treat it like Shemitah produce anymore. Now, there's two ways of understanding this. So first of all, why is the second rainfall determining this? And the answer is because anything that will be left in the field by the time that the second rains fall will be ruined by those second rains. And once something or that type of thing would be ruined if it stayed in the fields, it doesn't have the sanctity of Shemitah anymore. And that's because, based on what the Torah tells us about how to treat Shemitah produce, it tells us that it has to be eaten and it has to be left for the animals. Now, what we derive from that comparison to the animals is basically something that is edible to the animals, you can only eat. Something that's inedible to the animals, you can do anything that you want with it. It loses the sanctity of Shemitah. Now, it's important to point out this idea of the fruit being inedible to the animals in the wild because the rain would ruin them and the animals wouldn't eat from them anymore sounds very similar to what we said before about beer. Beer is determined when it's not available for the animals anymore. And we say, once it's not available, what you have to destroy, you have to remove. But here we're saying that once the second rains fall and becomes inedible, that actually you can do anything you want with it, with the Shemitah produce. You don't have to do beer. You can treat it like regular produce. There's no more sanctity of Shemitah. So how do we make these two things work together? So according to some commentaries, the explanation is like this. There's a difference. Beer takes place when something is not available, right? You collected some of this, whatever this produce is into your house for yourself, your animals, and we say, if this species of produce is not available anymore for the animals in the field, then you have to remove it from your domain. But that means that it's just not available. It's been used up. It doesn't mean that if this would have stayed in the field, it would have gotten ruined. Wouldn't have gotten ruined. The animals would have eaten from it. Just not available for the animals anymore. That's when we say that when it's not available for the animals, now you have to do beer. Now you have to remove it from your possession. But if we're talking about a stage where even if it would be available for the animals in the field, this thing would get ruined by the rain, then already the whole sanctity of Shemitah falls off. You don't have to do beer, and you can do anything that you want with it. So therefore, when our Mishna says that you can burn it by the time the second rainfall falls, that it could very well be that the time for beer for this stubble and for this straw already arrived. And you did beer. Just that, after you do beer, according to most opinions, beer consists of taking this out of your domain, declaring it ownerless, and actually you can go ahead and reclaim it. The question is, once you do beer and you reclaim it, what status does that produce have? Okay, I have it now. I don't have to do beer again. I can keep it. I can use it as long as I want. But how can I use it? Does it still retain the sanctity of Shemitah, or doesn't it retain the sanctity of Shemitah? So some learn that even after beer is performed, the sanctity of Shemitah is still there. And therefore, you have to eat this. You can't use this stubble or straw for fuel. But once it comes the second rains, which means that this stubble and straw, if it was still in the field, it would be inedible to the animals. At that point, you can treat it, this straw and stubble, like anything you want. You want to use it for the fuel, to burn, to heat up your oven, you can do it. Because at that point, it loses its Shemitah status. So this means that according to this explanation that we just gave, after beer, there is still a sanctity of Shemitah to what beer was done on. Once the second rains come, the sanctity is gone. Others disagree. Others learn differently. Others learn that once you do beer on something, it has no more sanctity of Shemitah anymore. And therefore, in our Mishnah, when the Mishnah says that you can burn the straw and the stubble as fuel once the second rains come, that's because the second rains are actually the time for beer of these things. The second rains are when stubble, straw, that's available for the animals in the wild for a very long time. And therefore, there's a long time, but you have at least a chance you don't have to do beer on it. But once the second rains fall, then already it's not available for the animals anymore. And therefore, you have to do beer on the straw and the stubble. And once you do the beer on the straw and the stubble, now the sanctity of Shemitah falls off because beer was done, because that's the halacha, but that's the law by beer, and therefore you can use it as fuel. So there's two ways of learning this part of the Mishnah. Either the reason why you can use the fuel, the stubble and the straw for the fuel once it rains is because although doing beer on them doesn't take off their sanctity, the second rains do take off their sanctity because when they be in the field, they'd be ruined and inedible to the animals, and that's what takes off the sanctity. According to others, the second rain is the time when you do have to do beer on the straw and the stubble, and once you do beer, there's no more sanctity to it, so you can use it for fuel. Okay, that is the end of the Mishnah. Now let's do the Sefer HaMitzvot. Okay, mitzvahs lo yisaseh shalignav nefesh miYisrael. Prohibition against kidnapping a Jew. Shenemar, as it says, lo yisignav. One of the 10 commandments is lo yisignav, which translated literally means don't steal. V'lamdu Chazal, but our sages in the Talmud taught us shezaz hara l'gayna nefesh miYisrael. They understood, they deduce that this prohibition is not just about stealing, it's actually specific to stealing a person, to kidnapping a fellow Jew. If you were to sell this person, you kidnapped a fellow Jew and you sold him as a slave, you're also going to transgress a prohibition, another prohibition. The pasuk states, they shall not be sold as the sale of a slave. And that's talking about a fellow Jew. And that is actually talking, the context there is not kidnapping per se, but but included in those words is to actually sell a fellow Jew away, to sell a fellow Jew away as a slave. Now, the Eiragan of Chayav Misa, this kidnapper is liable to a death penalty, but he only becomes liable to the death penalty as Yisrael, has to kidnap the Jew, and bring him into his domain. And he has to use him. Then sell him to others. That's what it takes to fully transgress this prohibition of kidnapping. You have to kidnap the person, kidnap the Jew. Kidnap means you bring him into your domain, you basically enslave him, you use him, and then you sell him. That is where the full transgression of the sign of the 10 commandments not to kidnap. And as he said before, when you sell, not only you transgress not to kidnap, you also transgress what's mentioned somewhere else, where it specifically says not to sell a fellow Jew as a slave. Now, let's say, who do you sell him to? You sell him to his father, to his brother. Basically, you sell him back to his relatives. Putter. Then you're exempt. The kind of selling that is part of the prohibition of kidnapping is when you sell him off to someone else. But if you actually sell him to his relatives, who may actually enslave him, but at the end of the day, you sold him to his relatives, that's the kind of selling that is not included in the prohibition of kidnapping. This applies in all places at all times, both by men and by women. Have a wonderful day. All the best.